guys, so today I wanted to talk just very briefly about um, something from this book, this amazing book by Robert Boswell, who was my teacher and mentor at New Mexico State University. He's at Houston now, but it's a book about writing called The Half Known World, and it's one of my favorite books about writing. I think Boz is able to talk about writing in such an accessible way that it's a great read, even if you're not a writer. I would say this would be a book that could also help you be a better reader. So, what I wanted to do was just read a couple of quotes from his first chapter, and the book's titled "The Half Known World," which is an awesome title. And the first chapter talks about that idea of a world being half known. So Boz starts out talking about worlds that we as consumers understand that are fully known. So if you think of most sitcoms, think of Friends or, choose whatever sitcom you like to watch. That world, The Office, I think is a really good one because it's such an enclosed world. In those worlds, we fully understand everything about them. There are no secrets, right? There are no, for the most part, surprises. And the problem with that, as Boz says, is this: a fully known world is devoid of mystery. There are often plenty of secrets, but ultimately, all you can do with the secret is to reveal it. So I think, if we're talking about a sitcom, different rules apply. But when you're talking about a book, specifically genre, I think one of the biggest pitfalls of genre is that the author tends to fully describe the world in such a way that you as the reader have no surprises left. And I get that, especially when you're writing genre in a way that the world is not the world in which we inhabit. You feel the need to spell out every single rule for the reader. And you do need to give the reader guidelines for sure. But I think we've all read that book that follows formula to such a T that we are bored of it. We know exactly what's going to happen. We know what everything in that world looks like. There's just nothing left for us to discover. So one thing that I am thinking about lately, are, especially in genre, how do you get around that? And I think one way is through character. You may have a world that you need to, for whatever reason, let's talk about something fantasy, Lord of the Rings. That world is mysterious, but it needs to be fairly fully described to us. Tolkien describes it very well because it's not our world. We have to understand it. But then he creates characters that are full of depth, and we are able to then attach to those characters and through them be surprised and discover things about the world. So Boz says, when talking about writing characters, specifically writing stereotypical characters, which, in a way we all kind of start from that, right? Like you have to have some sort of a stereotype to break or work from. It's very hard to completely avoid stereotypes. But instead of just, one way that authors try to get around having a stereotypical character is just to make that character completely the opposite, right? Like hooker with a heart of gold, or lonely detective who is actually like this really caring guy and, the best friend you'll ever have. Something, we tend to just make it completely the opposite and think that counts. But that's as boring as just writing a stereotype, right? It is in its own way a stereotype. So what Boz says in The Half Known World is the better method is to suggest the parts of the character that are, by most standards, invisible. In other words, assume that the attributes that make the character a type are merely the surface features. Right? So you can still have the type. You can still have the ruggedly handsome cowboy, the hooker with a heart of gold, the scared heroine who must find herself in order to defeat the monster. But write the characters so that His actions and dialogue suggest that the reader can only ever half know him. So there still needs to be some sort of mystery, some way that we as a reader understand that this character is complex, has depth, and because of that, the world that he or she inhabits also has depth and mystery. So, just something to think about. I think, you know, even just as a reader, that reaction you might have when you're reading some genre, when it's not as good as it could be, and it's not as fulfilling, and you wonder why. Think about whether or not the world and the characters are half known or fully known to you. And if they're fully known, is this maybe the reason why the book is not all it could be? And if you're a writer, I challenge you and I challenge myself to keep working towards the mystery, to keep exploding the known world so that we can only ever half know it. And I will put a link to Boswell's book. It's well worth a read. I hope you guys check it out. And also, as always on this blog tour, check out the links to the side for today's stop and check out Consumption, which is officially out. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow.